What's up, everyone? It's Sheletta. I'm here getting a phone for one of my newly minted teenagers with Xfinity Mobile. They've got great options, affordable plans, and solid coverage that works for our whole family. With Xfinity Mobile, my daughter can stay connected with me wherever she goes. And did you know when you sign up, you can get an extra phone line free for a full year? Switch to Xfinity Mobile today for more savings, more smiles, and more ways to stay connected.
Want your boss to put some real action behind the rhetoric when they talk about making your workplace more inclusive? Find out how to hold their feet to the fire and demand diversity on the Diversity Dude podcast.
Hello there, and welcome back to the Diversity Dude podcast. I'm your host, Lambert Fisher, marriage and family therapist, award-winning author, and national speaker on the topic of multicultural awareness and diversity. And for those of you who are interested in even more positive and encouraging tips and strategies beyond what I share in podcasts like this, then feel free to check out my award-winning book, Diversity in Clinical Practice, nationally recognized for the unique way in which it addresses the often difficult topic of multicultural awareness and diversity. Designed for more than just therapists, if you're a helping professional in any way, Diversity in Clinical Practice can help you meet the greatest variety of cultural needs possible for those whom you serve. And it's available in paper and audiobook versions for your convenience. And if you haven't heard it yet, I invite you to visit TED.com and check out my talk called What to Do When You Offend Someone, where I offer a positive and practical perspective on how to navigate unintentional offenses in daily life. To date, it's been viewed over 500,000 times. Check it out for yourself. And if you're encouraged by it as well, share it with a friend. And whether it be through my one-on-one relationship building efforts as a therapist or my informing and empowering efforts as an author or speaker, know that my personal mission is to do my part to improve the world one strengthened relationship at a time. So today I want to share with you an encouraging perspective on implicit bias in sports and beyond. So whether or not you're a sports fan, you may have heard that the National Football League, the NFL, recently held its annual draft where teams select the next round of incoming players, choosing from the best rated college players in the country. And while approximately 250 players will wait anxiously to see if they'll be chosen by a professional team and be able to continue to play the game that they love at a professional level, only a select few of those considered to be the best of the best by players, coaches, and their adoring fans not only expect to be chosen, but they expect to be chosen near the top of that list. These players will not only be happy to be on the team at all, but they'll hope to have a significant impact, potentially even be called on to lead a team of professional athletes for years to come. So why do I mention all of this? Well, because one of those players garnered a lot of attention recently during the multiple day draft process, in part because of his draft experience was not what many had expected. Shedeur Sanders, son of Hall of Famer Deion Sanders, was a quarterback, in many ways a leader, who helped revitalize a losing football team and turn them into a nationally acclaimed winning football team, and was indeed drafted and will have the pleasure of playing the game he loves in the National Football League. However, despite being considered by many to be one of the best college players in the country at his position, he was not drafted number one or in the top 10 or even the top 100. Instead, he was a 144th pick in the draft. This understandably left many professional players, coaches, media, and fans baffled as to how and why this could have happened, with many suggesting various speculations as to what could have been the cause. One popular theory was that racial bias was not only the unjustified reason, but also a side of a much bigger issue that needs to be addressed, which is why this topic is here for today's podcast. For not only do I receive periodic questions regarding navigating tense or polarized cross-cultural relationships in the workplace, I also get questions about the actual topics that divide people, whether those topics are discussed at work, at home, or anywhere else in the community. And while I do not claim to be a sports expert specifically, the factors that are being explored in these circumstances and theories and the potential reactions to them have implications far outside of sports and might impact you in one way or another. So, in order to help you explore and navigate these and similar dilemmas, I'd like to share a few considerations regarding exploring implicit bias in sports and beyond. For starters, let me make something very clear. Bias can be defined simply as having a tendency, inclination, or partiality for or against something based on something other than merit. Implicit or unconscious bias simply refers to bias that happens without you needing to be consciously aware of it. Based on this definition, we all have biases, as in tendencies or inclinations in some way. These are often based on increased comfort with things in which we're familiar and discomfort with things which we are less familiar. There are no automatic guarantees for what would make someone biased toward or against, but it is up to each of us individually to hold ourselves accountable for our inclinations and corresponding behaviors. And it's up to all of us together to hold each other accountable when someone's personal responsibility isn't sufficient to prevent unwarranted harm toward others. With all that as a foundation, let me start with this. Consideration number one: sometimes it's not about you. Going back to the NFL draft, many speculate that Shedeur Sanders wasn't drafted higher because of racial bias and a double standard for how black male athletes should act and interact with their superiors, in this case, white NFL owners and most often white NFL head coaches. However, there are many others who highlight the reality that many NFL teams already have the people that they need at the position in which he plays, i.e., they already have a starting quarterback. They go on to suggest that not every quarterback plays the game in the same way, and these teams simply believe that a different player would fit their style of play more effectively for completely football-centered reasons. Now, even if you believe this isn't the primary reason for multiple football teams passing on this player, whose accolades seem to justify the merit he was garnered, it would be hard to argue against this possibility for many, though not all, in the same way NFL teams are consideration. In the same way, as most of you listening are not NFL athletes, this is a good reminder that, to put it simply, not every time you're not chosen isn't automatically a sign of implicit bias. Sometimes it's not about you. Sometimes even if you really want an opportunity or believe you're qualified to do it, that doesn't mean that you are what they're looking for. Before going straight to accusations of implicit bias, explore the motivations that went into the decision-making process, including their goals and their needs. If you didn't meet the description that they were looking for, then you can feel bad. You can argue whether what they want is actually what they need, but you will likely need to accept their choice and move on. However, if you do meet their stated goals and needs and were still not considered, then keep listening. Consideration number two: sometimes it is about you, but not for the reason that you think. Going back to the NFL, some NFL media speculated that the reason why Shedeur Sanders didn't get selected higher is that NFL owners and coaches acknowledged his athletic potential, but didn't want to accept the potential risk of his popularity impacting their decisions. For example, maybe they didn't like that with him came increased scrutiny and pressure from his Hall of Fame father, Deion Sanders, or that with him on the sidelines behind their existing starting quarterback, any inconsistency on the field would result in crowd swells calling for the backup to go in, eliminating the coach's freedom to lead by supporting their existing quarterback with patience, guidance, and grace. In the same way, in your life, maybe you were passed up for a job opportunity or feel overlooked for a promotion and feel like implicit bias might be involved. While it is possible, it's also possible that while you weren't exactly what they needed, there was something else about you that made you not the candidate they were looking for. Maybe you are the best one, accomplished at doing the task, but another candidate showed similar skills at doing as well as skills at leading others in a way that made them better at their job. Or maybe you show that you could do the job while on a team of other exceptional professionals, whereas another candidate showed that they could do the job even with less talent around them. Sure, a preference for the latter may not feel the best or be the best vote of confidence for the existing team members, but it is an available consideration in many, though not all circumstances, which is how we get to consideration number three. Sometimes it's exactly the implicit bias that it appears to be. You see, even as I make intentional efforts to avoid quick presumptions about the motivations of others' behaviors and actively look for alternative possible contributing factors and support for those possibilities, I must also consider the very real possibility and consideration that it is exactly the negative and discouraging implicit bias possibility that it appears to be. In the case of Shedeur Sanders, while it's possible that NFL teams didn't need him as much as he might have hoped, or that there were non-football excellence reasons for the decision to choose other players ahead of him, it's also very possible, some would suggest more likely, that Shedeur Sanders, a black male athlete, was evaluated at a different, dare I say, double standard in comparison to other athletes. And yes, I know that approximately 53% of athletes in the NFL are African American, a number that I suggest many of you might have guessed was a lot higher. However, I also know that there is a long history of Black quarterbacks being doubted in their intellectual abilities to lead, as well as the character standard by which they are evaluated on and off the field. For while many non Black athletes are praised for being confident, even to the point of arrogance, as long as their play on the field justified such, many Black athletes, such as Shedeur Sanders, were sent the message that their confidence was seen as a liability. It suggests that for Black quarterbacks, it is humility and a willingness to lower oneself in the presence of owners and coaches that are the traits that are to be praised and pursued. In this small way, knowing that implicit bias can manifest in a multitude of ways, many built their argument for what they believed to be unwarranted treatment of Shedeur Sanders. Now, let me be clear. Neither Shedeur Sanders nor any athlete is entitled to get drafted at all, nor entitled to get a job on any particular professional football team. Similarly, not drafting this particular player, or any player for that matter, is not an automatic sign of implicit bias or any other racial injustice on the part of the teams and their owners. However, just as the arguments that do not support implicit bias are possible, have merit, and are worth consideration, so does the argument for implicit bias may indeed be a contributing factor for the merit or lack thereof. It is worth consideration. The question is, are we focused only on assuming the best at all costs? Or are we willing to consider the best alongside of considering the worst and ask follow-up questions to identify which is actually true? Similarly, in your daily life, it is possible that things that seem like they're influenced by racial bias may not be what they seem. However, it's also possible that they are exactly the bias and injustice they seem to be. The question is, what are you willing to do about it? Are you focused on getting really good at responding to concerns of bias by dismissing anything that feels negative or might make someone look or feel bad? Or are you going to listen to both sides and be honest if any discrepancies arise? Again, the goal is not to punish or exile. Rather, the goal is to identify any unjustified or unfair treatment and promote change. Change that provides equal opportunities where deserved. Now, before I end, I must acknowledge that somebody heard that last part and thought to themselves, exactly. Let's get rid of all these unjustified DEI hires and transition to merit-based hiring. The only problem with that logic is that the whole point of DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion policies and procedures, was to ensure that people who actually had the merit weren't getting overlooked due to biases that came from unfamiliarity or worse. The problem is the logic that assumes that professionals and minority groups must not have had the merit in the first place. And if that's your concern, then I encourage you to do some self-reflection and explore where those assumptions might have originated and investigate whether reality supports it or something much different. With all that in mind, my hope for you, whether you consider yourself an athlete or not, is that you would set a standard for yourself that you will be willing to explore any biased tendencies, inclinations, or preferences you may have, and to do your best to acknowledge their influence on your perspective, while also making intentional efforts to not let them dictate your behavior toward others. Resist the temptation to dismiss or negatively view anything which you are not familiar with. Don't assume the worst, don't assume the best. Hope for the best, but test reality every chance you get. And if you discover inconsistencies and unfair treatment of others, then be a part of the change that benefits everyone in the end. And with that, I'll say thanks again for listening to today's Diversity Do podcast. If you have any pressing diversity-related questions that you'd like me to address on an upcoming podcast, or if your organization is in need of a shame-free and empowering guest speaker or training on this often sensitive topic, then feel free to reach out to me directly at www.diversitymadesimple.com. And if you know of anyone else who can benefit from a positive and encouraging perspective on this often difficult topic of diversity, feel free to send them a link to this podcast so they can be encouraged as well, or share with them my award-winning book, Diversity in Clinical Practice, available at Amazon.com. And don't forget to visit TED.com and check out my talk called What to Do When You Offend Someone. I hope it inspires you and that you share it with someone so that they can be inspired as well. And as usual, I look forward to addressing as many topics as possible in future podcasts to help you improve as many relationships as possible at home, at work, and in your community. And as always, remember this: you don't need to know everything about everyone in order to have a positive impact on someone. Thank you all for tuning in, and have a great day.
Tune in each week and find out how to demand and implement diversity at your job. To hear more, check out previous Diversity Dude shows on ShelettaMakesMeLaugh.com.
You know Sheletta makes you laugh, but did you know Sheletta Brundidge can also make you think and boost your business? Media personality, activist, and comedian Sheletta Brundidge founded Sheletta Makes Me Laugh to celebrate and share the best of Black culture. It's a podcasting platform. You can download 10 weekly podcasts hosted by African-American subject experts at ShelettaMakesMeLaugh.com or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. ShelettaMakesMeLaugh.com is also a production house, creating broadcast-quality commercial content. And Sheletta and her team of storytellers create powerful promotional campaigns to get businesses the brand awareness they're looking for. Some of Minnesota's top businesses trust Sheletta, and you can too. Get out the word about your events and products and get in front of communities of color with ShelettaMakesMeLaugh.com. She's got the power to help your business.
When I was introduced to Bremer, I really appreciated it. It was more of a relationship. The support that we have in project-based lending, it's emboldening us to go after larger projects. That is a game changer for a small business. The resources and the support from Bremer Bank is exciting that I could stay with them forever. Sometimes when you're working with bankers, they relish the fact of saying no. With Bremer, it's like they're finding a way to say yes.